All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on ending catch and release, growing your advisor force. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm gonna kind of wait a couple of beats here as we allow a few more folks to sign in. I see that's happening quickly. While we wait for that to happen, I'm gonna cover how you all in the audience can join today's discussion. The best way to get us your questions and comments is to click the raise your hand button, which is either at the bottom or the top of your screen. I'm never quite sure. I'll get a little notification that'll allow me to actually bring you into today's panel. You can join us through audio or through video as well if you're set up to do that. That'll allow you to answer ask your question, make sure it gets answered, and have any back and forth with us that you'd like to have. If you'd prefer, you can also send us your questions through the chat function. We'll all be keeping an eye on that over the course of today's event, and we'll try to answer all of the questions that we receive. It looks like folks are still signing in, but given the time, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Once again, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on growing your advisor force. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We're happy to be hosting today's event. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors, without whose support today wouldn't be possible. Our sponsors today are Merrill Financial Institutions Group and InSource. Thanks to you both. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking over the list of those of you that are signing in, and I'm struck by how many of you have joined us for some of our previous webinars, and we've done a lot of these events at this point, and I'm sure that in addition to ours, you out there in the audience have probably sat in on a lot of virtual events over the last year and a half. So I want to thank all of you who are repeat customers. I want to thank you for joining us once again, and for those of you who joined us for the first time, I think you picked a really good topic to sit in on today. I'm going to introduce you just quickly to the way that we do things. We found the best way to get a virtual discussion flowing is to have a few faces on the screen throughout the webinar. There's a list of their names on the screen right now. I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen so that you can see all of their faces as we go over them. But before I do that, I want to say once again that these events, we hold them for the benefit of you in the audience, and the value that you'll get out of this experience will be greater if you chime in either by raising your hand or by using the chat function to make sure that your questions and your voices can be heard. That being said, I'm going to introduce you to the faces you see on your screen now. Joining us from Huntington Financial Advisors, we have Lisa Betcher. Thank you, Lisa. Greg D. Geronimo from InSource. Thanks for your support, Greg. John Gagliardi, from M&T. Thanks for joining us, John. Jay McAnally from Merrill. Thanks for joining us and thanks for your support. Alex Serafianos, who is not on your screen right now. We're trying to connect and make sure that Alex can join us as well. And Michael Smith from Wintrust. Thank you, Michael. In addition to myself, we have a few other members of the Kehrer Bielan team on your screen today. Our principals, Ken Kehrer and Peter Bielan, and Denise, who's joining us for the first time as a member of the Kehrer Bielan team. So you'll be hearing more from Denise later today. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen for a little bit here and present this slide just sort of by way of kicking off today's discussion. some of you may have seen this slide before. It comes out of our annual Checkup report, the most recent edition of which we published a few weeks ago. This is, the broadest possible view of the delivery of financial services through banks and credit unions. The data in this study is broad and deep and really represents the full industry view. And what we've done here is we've pulled 3 metrics that we track through that study, and we've indexed them to 2015. The 3 measures we're looking at here are the thick blue bar is total gross revenue, top line revenue. The light blue bar is average revenue per advisor productivity, and the green bar is advisor headcount. And as you can see, if you go back to 2015, just looking at the green bar, which really is the focus of today's conversation, if you go back to 2015 and then you fast forward to 2020, you can see that there's 2.5% fewer advisors working in banks and credit unions today than there was 5-6 years ago. So not only does it look like banks and credit unions by and large are not adding advisors, we're actually letting a few of them slip out the back door. Now, during the middle period of this time period that we're looking at here, you can see that banks and credit unions were able to rely on increases in advisor productivity to drive top line revenue growth. This, of course, coincided with a period of transition away from the sale of transactional products and more into the fee-based business. So that's that's part of what helps to kind of explain that growth that we see from 2016 to 2018. But in more recent years, advisor productivity has plateaued, and that has a lot of firms looking to the other lever that they can pull to drive growth, right? Which is adding advisors, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, of course, financial institutions, right, as I said at the top, haven't been particularly successful at adding advisors. But that is not the case for every firm in our industry, and it's certainly not the case within the financial advice industry as a whole. Peter, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
I will, and thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this afternoon. So what we want to do today was, as Tim said, really speak about what's so important to growing revenue and adding to profitability and allowing your program to deliver what you want it to deliver. And it's your net number of advisors. And what we'll cover today is, in a broad term, recruiting as far as bringing advisors in. And then as a second part, retention. Once you have advisors, how to best hold on to them, because those are the 2 variables in that equation. So what I wanted to do today is really highlight what's going on in the marketplace. And I thought a couple examples of our industry would be helpful to understand, not that we should necessarily do exactly what other firms are doing, but so that we realize the focus and the energy and the resources that many of our competitors are putting behind recruiting and retaining their advisors. Okay, so the first example out there is Fidelity. And this news story is just within the last 2 weeks. And the news story is that Fidelity is hiring 4,000 employees, 2,500 financial consultants and customer service reps. 4,000, Phoenix, Houston, Minneapolis, and on. Probably operations in those markets. Competing with digital again, 20 new markets as well. Expected to fill 2,000 of the new positions by mid-year. Like I said, this came out about 2 weeks ago. 2,000 positions by mid-year, licensed employees in many cases, doing plans in many cases. And they expect to grow in the next 3 years, I believe it is, over 5,000 employees. So you can see that in this example, Fidelity is a big competitor today in the.
So Peter, you're breaking up. So it's
folks is going to increase. We haven't faced that in the past, but time was up.
Yeah, there's some delays. There's some delays in Peter's audio from my end.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're picking up on that as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Let's try it with maybe no video.
Much better.
Is that better? Are you saying it's better because there's no video or because I'm not breaking up?
You're not breaking up.
All right.
But I think we got the gist of the Fidelity. Why don't you jump on?
Okay, we'll keep moving. All right, I apologize for the technology. So, okay, so the Fidelity folks may handle a lot of low-end clients, but how about Merrill Lynch? Well, they handle clients that are much more in our range. Well, if we look at Merrill Lynch, B of A has, in essence, doubled down as well. And they're putting together really a combined career development that includes banking, believe it or not, banking and advisors are going to grow by 25%, 700 new advisors in the next 3 years, net new. And, some are going to be in the Merrill Lynch branch, some will be in banks. And then I think the important thing here from this quote is that Merrill knows exactly what they want to and how to accomplish it over the next 20 years. And he's right, because what they're doing is they're looking at their business and how it's going to perform over the next 20 years. And they're going to add advisors that maybe aren't profitable immediately because they're in it for the next 20 years. And that's hard to compete against as the years go on if we're managing for the shorter term than that. And I just thought that was an extremely important quote for them for this to come out and say that is really the approach that Merrill takes. So the point of these two are competition for the advisors that's already difficult is going to increase. Probably what you already knew, but this really reinforced, okay? So maybe with that, we've had success, in recruiting advisors and retention for that matter, especially in this last year. But with this in mind, I'd like to turn it over. It really experienced the growth in advisors and the net number of advisors within their span of control in their business and what has worked for them, especially this last year, but really consistently over time to add and retain the most important revenue asset of the firm, being advisors. So you can't see me, but I can still see all of you. So how about Michael? I know Michael Smith. I know you've seen an interesting perspective from your CFO role and from being at multiple firms with advisors. Tell me, your perspective. And one more thing that I'd add to that is that Michael at Wintrust has advisors that are both in branch and more freestanding, and that might lend some good discussion as well. So, Michael, if you'd share your thoughts.
Well, Peter, I didn't want to start out with a question, but I'd be curious as to the roles of those advisors at Fidelity and maybe the compensation structure as well. And I don't want to bring everything back to comp, but I'd be just, if there's any more color around what might be happening with those roles, For us, we have an aging population of financial advisors. We have not lost too many over the last 2 years. I think last year we lost 2, but those were at the lower end and would not have been regrettable attrition. And we've brought in about 5 or 6 each year, but it's been a bit of a slog. I mean, to see those kinds of numbers from firms like that, and the size of those kinds of adds to staff are pretty are kind of breathtaking in a way. So I'm wondering if what we're offering to financial advisors, either in the way of compensation and experience, is exactly the same as what those goals and plans are at Merrill Lynch. But to your point, yes, we do have a mix, a hybrid business, in that we have 70 financial advisors, 46 or 47 teams. 2/3 of those are bank-based, and about 1/3 are what we call, I guess, second floor or independent, and operate separate from the bank channel.
So, Michael, the teams that you have, maybe just talk a little bit about how you form teams, because that is one of the ways that we've seen firms hold on and bring in more advisors. Yeah.
Well, so, the environment that I came from, I didn't see as much of the teams, but part of the comp structure at Wintrust Investments is salary allocation. So producers get to a certain level, and then there's dollars that they earn to spend on support, right? So as their books of business grow, then they're adding either a junior advisor, a junior financial planner, or a sales associate to help them build their practice. And the way that's evolving today is, and that's not been done on a standardized basis. So you could see one team approach that a little bit differently than another. But as that's rolled out more and more over time, what we're now seeing is the need for succession planning, and how do those junior people who are on the team now take over the book of business over some life where the financial advisor sunsets and moves out of the business, retires, and changes the direction of their life.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks, Michael. Maybe we'll come back to you on teams and a little bit more on that later. I appreciate that. John, maybe you could follow up on that. And I know you've recruited extensively in your different territories that you've had over your career, and you've done it very successfully. What's the approach that's worked for you, and what are some of the things that have really seemed to resonate in bringing advisors in?
Thanks, Peter. So it's interesting. The last year, I've really focused a lot on retention, and I can kind of cover that a little bit later as we get to that segment. But from a recruiting standpoint, frankly, the last few recruits that I brought in, which was really early in 2020, I brought them in and really used the structure that you and I had talked about, which was a structure where you bring somebody in on salary, and then you really kind of you make it a 2 to 3 year kind of salary deal. And then you focus on the activities that are going to make this person successful, so that when they fall in the past, you bring somebody in, you put them on a forgivable draw for a while, and then they kind of fall off a cliff, right? Because the draw ends, and now they're not able to always survive. And so it's worked really well, especially in the last year through the with the pandemic. We focused on bringing somebody in. You pay them a salary. You focus on financial planning. You focus on bringing in new relationships. You focus on things like insurance. Those activities that that ultimately are going to make them successful in 2 to 3 years. And so we've been able to have folks kind of start off and hit the pandemic and be able to survive because of that. So I think that's been really helpful in the last year. In my entire career, I've really kind of, I focused a lot on really trying to find that right person. You look for that person who, has the will to be successful, who's that kind of go-getter, but maybe they're just not in that right situation, and try to, bring them in, and a lot of times they'll fit great in your program. Frankly, I think, as far as where do you get those folks from, obviously working with, wholesalers, working with my competitors, just because somebody across the street is my competitor, that doesn't mean that, that they can't be my friend. And frankly, it doesn't mean that, their program is maybe a little bit different than mine. And so the person who's not a good fit, maybe for them, could be the right fit for you. And so having those relationships really help. Having a network of advisors, I tend to kind of unofficially manage a lot of advisors in the DC area. And I think, they call me to be that kind of mentor, or to run those questions by, with their business. And I find that, kind of being that person who picks up the phone and talks to that advisor at another firm, even though they're not on my team, but being able to kind of, be that person who to provide advice, sooner or later, they're going to end up working for me. So spending that extra time, building those relationships has really paid off for me in the past.
Sooner or later, they're going to end up working for me. It's a pretty good quote. I like it. I don't know the answer to this, John, so I'm going out on a limb by asking it, but I think it's a good answer, is that about how much of your overall time do you spend in either networking with advisors, recruiting advisors, just doing something that would lead to a new hire someday in your firm?
Did John just freeze?
I think so.
Yeah, I think John did. Yeah, this time. Okay. Well, we'll have to all wait to hear that answer. So while John thaws out for a minute, we're going to transition to Lisa and get her thoughts. And Lisa, I've seen, you've really seen a lot of different roles within Huntington, and probably gives you a very good perspective of how to recruit and how to change and how to, move up in a career. And that's probably brought you some good insights on how to, bring in folks when you're in a role now of hiring. So maybe you could share what has worked well for you.
Absolutely. I would love to. And yes, within the banking channel and the investment bank broker dealer channel, I've held many roles. And, I thought it was an interesting question of what you said, and kind of got me thinking in my head, okay, well, how much of my time do I spend recruiting? Just kind of some of the normal things that we all do with recruiting, working with our HR, our talent acquisition, pulling different lists. We use discovery data. But also, some of the things that we do in our day-to-day is also part of our recruiting. So from that standpoint of, having held many different roles within a bank broker dealer, I've got a lot of relationships within that, the banking channel, both with district managers, with different business segment leaders, and in today's world, it's calls, but, prior to COVID-19, it was going out and, joining meetings or joining different business segment meetings or calls. But, it's always about talking to them too. So some of those things that we're doing, even if it's not making the dials and trying to, talk to the advisors right then and there, still ends up being recruiting, because as we get new bankers that come in, as we get new branch managers, part of my role as the sales managers, I'm reaching out to those people and always trying to think of ahead and, building that advisor headcount. And I like to have conversations with them about, talk to me a little bit about where you came from and who you worked with there. I want to get good recommendations from our colleagues. If we thought that they were a good fit to hire into our bank, then certainly, a recommendation from them, I think would be, a good thing. And I definitely have found, I've recruited a couple different advisors from that standpoint. To your point of, hiring from within, obviously, I came up through the ranks in Huntington, so I'm a big fan of, growing and career pathing, and part of a lot of different organizations that we do at Huntington. Right now, we launched with our equity and inclusion, we're looking at really just growing the awareness out there. So as I look at that slide and see that the advisor headcount is going down, some of that I just have to attribute to the fact that, there's a lot of people that don't really know about our business, don't really know, what it entails, the different changes about our business. So going back to John's point of the compensation packages and how things have changed, we've done the same. We've moved from that, forgivable draw for 6 months to that, salary-based program for a couple of years. But there's still that mentality out there that, hey, I might think about being a financial advisor. I love talking about and thinking about investments, but can't be commission only. So, it's part of our job to create that awareness, create that education that's out there that, hey, this role has really changed. And I've been able to recruit a couple advisors, just from that standpoint of letting them know, it's not the same as it was 5-10 years ago. It's a completely different world now, and we're going to get you help to get you set up and make sure that you're successful in this business.
Yeah, very good. A new way to look at it. And it sounds like both of you have taken a much longer term approach than maybe what we would have expected as a ramp up time a couple of years ago to what that ramp up time is nowadays. Yeah, good, thanks. Jay and Greg, you all see a lot of different programs. Jay, you have programs all over the country, and Greg, you probably have seen programs all over the country. What, some of the best ones that you all interact with, what are some of the takeaways that you say, boy, they got it down. They've got the best practice, of handling some of the, recruiting challenges that are out there. Maybe Jay, we would start with you.
Thanks, Peter. And I would agree with what a lot of the panelists have said, but what we've seen, our most successful partners, and we counsel a lot of banks and credit unions on their recruiting efforts, is you always got to start with, what type of advisor you're recruiting for and what type of position are you going to recruit them into. And I think the days of looking for a $200,000 Edward Jones advisor and hoping to turn them into a $500,000 or a $500,000 advisor is different. And you can actually go out there and hire the $500,000 to $1 million producers straight into your program if you know that's what you're recruiting for, if you have the right comp plan to attract them, and you have a very, very clear client experience and systems for them to use. Because to play well in that market, you have to have a very, very clear professional recruiting staff that knows exactly what they're looking for, and they're partnered with the leadership of the institution. Because that's the first thing that advisors want to know is the institution I'm working with. Not so much for how many referrals am I going to get, more so about what is the culture, what is my longevity, what is my career path if I move my practice over here. So I always think it really starts with who are you recruiting, the type of advisor, and having a lot of different institutions we partner with, it's not always the same. Some only want to recruit top producers. Others are looking to help build their advisor force. So it really is different. You got to make that first distinction, and then you can launch everything from that point. Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Jay, thank you. I agree with the comments of the panel. I think the different things that a lot of advisors, when we are talking, I'm sorry guys, I'm in the airport. A lot of the things that they're looking for are actually top-down management support. What is the program's commitment to the investment plan? What is the tenure of the leadership? that are in place, because product is now just a commodity. Everybody's got all the same products. And so it is about the advisor experience, the processes, and then the client experience at the end. You know, the referral systems in the branches, while clients have pivoted out, especially with COVID last year, found different ways to engage. And we find that's interesting for advisors. Those questions tend to come up a lot more now too. And how are we bringing in new business? We saw many advisors flourish in 2020 as they adopted more technology, got back on the phones, and their efficiencies got up because they were seeing more clients via Zoom meetings or telephone reviews, and a lot of production went up. So it's a combination, but a driving answer is always, what is the commitment from the bank and the senior leadership? That we always get that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, Tim, let's go to this next slide. And panel, I'll come back to you after this slide and you know, start thinking about what else we have out there that we can take a different look at how we position advisors within the financial institution. And that's what this slide is really meant to do. It's, again, it's to help us understand what's going on in the marketplace. Now, this doesn't mean, what I'm going to cover, this doesn't mean that we should change our financial commitment and how we transition new advisors financially. But it does mean that we have to address this. And the two pieces of data that I want us to consider here is, first of all, Morgan Stanley. So Morgan Stanley has $3.24 billion of outstanding loans. Now, they have an advisor force of almost 16,000 advisors. But that means on average, and not all these advisors received a loan, and some of them have it and it's already been paid off. But on average, if you look at every advisor that they have, there's a balance of $203,000 in liability, if you will, for every Morgan Stanley advisor. UBS, similar but higher. The same, you know, analysis, 1.87 billion, $304,000 in outstanding balance per advisor. So what's happening here is that these firms and others, I mean, I could have put Merrill Lynch on here. I just didn't have the data as easily, but every firm out there, you know, large firm out there has done this. But what these firms are doing is they're using their balance sheet. They have said that we'll use our balance sheet to the tune of $200,000 to $300,000 per person and put that as a liability on our balance sheet to be able to recruit. Okay. So the question is that, you know, the hypothetical is, you know, how many advisors could your firm add if it utilized its balance sheet similar to this to recruit more competitively? So, I mean, just in the simplest of terms, you know, for every 10 advisors, that's, you know, if you use the blend of this, that's $2.5 million. If you have 100 advisors, you know, that's $25 million. So, you know, for the firm with 100 advisors out there, if you had $25 million to deploy towards recruiting advisors, how would that change your advisor sales force today? Okay, so that's the first question that I'm hypothetically going to put out to the panel. And then you can answer that or you know, let's say you're just not able to do that because you could do it financially. All your balance sheets have the ability and your banks or credit unions have the ability to do this, but you may not choose not to. And that's a business choice. You may not choose to, you know, deploy capital in that sense. But if you don't, and you're trying for that same pool of advisors, what are you going to do in place of that to be able to recruit on par? Because these are the folks that you're trying to hire. These 15 and 6,000, you know, these 21, 22,000 advisors, you would love to have most of them. And these firms are coming after your existing advisors. So how do we reframe the financial part of it internally? Or if you can't, what are some of the things that we could do to bridge that gap? Okay. So maybe we'll go a little bit reverse order if we could. So Greg, if you're not getting called for your plane at the moment, what thoughts do you have? What thoughts do you have on these questions that I pose?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up on me, Peter.
Okay.
Jump to Jay real quick, and I'll chime in a minute.
So
okay,
Peter, it's a really good question. It's a good question, and I tell you, since we at Ameriprise, there's multiple different channels. You know, an advisor could join a branch, or they could join an institution partnership, and those are two very different economic packages from a recruiting standpoint. So Morgan Stanley, because they don't have a financial institution involved, can pay a lot bigger package because their economics than anyone that is involved with an institution paying that out. But I can tell you, I see advisors make the choice to join an institution program over the large package that a wirehouse might provide based on the fit, the culture, and the future, and their ability to potentially, I would say, gain equity in their practice, but their ability to have a sunset, you know, in the future. And if you can line up those opportunities in that career path for that advisor, they will choose that over the upfront money or the larger package if they see that value. But you have to be able to put them side by side and really articulate those differences.
Mm-hmm. So a very good, clean message of why this channel wins over, you know, an alternative channel that advisor could be searching for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jay, and to that point, we are seeing a lot of bank advisors transition to independent models, getting the big upfront checks right now. Is everybody recruiting? And it's the back end. What is the commitment on a 5 or 7 year note? Do they really develop that? And can they prospect and develop on their own? It is a fluid situation. I think I'd be interested on, Peter, and I don't know if you have that number, but how many bank advisors have maybe gone independent or RIA of that attrition in the bank channel. But they are actively, you know, a lot of the independents and other channels we cover, you know, the 800,000 plus producers are being courted on a regular basis for that. So to Jay's point, having a sunset provision, a quality culture, those all add in, and that's what you need to be reinforcing from the top of the house, is you don't need to leave to go sell your book. We'll come up with some options so that they don't feel like they have to jump, because what happens as soon as an advisor leaves, it's all good news stories. They got a big payout, they're really happy, and they're trying to build it. And a lot of advisors are conflicted. Should I leave? Should I stay? The best programs that we cover have clear messaging, and those guys get constantly called and are getting all up front, but they realize it's not the upfront check that they need to do it. And they're looking at their long-term career path, because the bank does solve so many problems for them, and not being a business owner, just allowing them to focus on the client. And when you net it out expense-wise, banks can be very competitive if they have the right package, to Jay's point.
Mm-hmm. Good. I think that's a great point, Greg, as far as, you know, what that true package is, as far as an advisor not having to run their business other than just their investment business while they're at the bank or credit union. And that's a big advantage. So I'm glad you bring that up. Lisa, any thoughts on what Jay or Greg said, or the questions that I pose as far as how you position that value proposition?
Yeah, the one thing that I would add to that is, you know, kind of the whole theme of this, that the advisor count is shrinking, it's not growing. You know, we're starting to see that this world is just, it's smaller and smaller all the time. The investment world is, you know, like one little small town where everybody knows everybody. And I think some of that mentality of being able to woo the advisors away with the big check and the grass is greener on the other side probably has lost some of its effectiveness, because, you know, they do know someone else who's done that and it didn't work out the way that they want to. And to the point of culture, you know, I've spoken to several advisors and several high-level advisors that you would think they get to this point where, hey, you know, my trails, my recurring revenue has built up so much where it just doesn't make any sense for me to leave. But we're finding those advisors that are leaving because the culture of the company where they're working at is just not where they want to spend their time day to day. And I think, you know, 2020 and what happened with the pandemic really has put a highlight on your company and how they treat you, because we're finding all kinds of conversations with advisors now that really, you know, probably wouldn't have thought about it prior to 2020 happening. But, you know, they looked at, okay, how is my company treating me? How is the culture here? How is my work-life balance? You know, there's so many things that are becoming so much more important than just the compensation package. I think advisors' minds are opening to that. You know, to that point of the sunset provision, though, I think that's still the one really big sticking piece where probably, especially the bank broker dealer, that's something, you know, we've got to start to look out for. We've got to start to put a plan together to make sure that we are retaining those top level, you know, advisors, and that they don't go somewhere else for that big paycheck.
Very nice. Yep. John or Michael, any thoughts on adding to the good comments that we've heard so far?
Well, first of all, it's to me, it's not an accident that Morgan Stanley is leading the pack here, right? The Wall Street firms are the ones that are the best at making the money fastest. And if you looked at Morgan Stanley's financials, their margins are like 25%, which is pretty high for a wealth management firm. I think a big part of that is what you're highlighting here on the slide, and that is lending, and probably in particular securities-based lending. We're actually in the process of upgrading that platform as part of our business, because we do have an appetite to use the bank's balance sheet. And I think it's also provides financial advisors a little bit more flexibility. Margin lending in our practice is very, very small, which I guess you would expect. We're not Schwab or Ameritrade, and margin loans are going through the roof in those self-directed firms, but not so much in a firm like ours. But I think if I understand securities-based lending correctly, it gives the advisor a little bit more flexibility in working with their clients on a financial plan. So I think that's probably the number one reason that we're moving towards it. It just gives the financial advisor more options and more ways to work with their clients, but it's also a very high margin business as well.
Okay.
And Peter, I guess what I would add is I agree with the panelists 100%. All my counterparts here, you know, in 21 plus years of managing financial advisors, you know, have worked in programs where, you know, you're able to kind of write that check, or, you know, if it's about, if the recruiting process is all about the money, it's usually not the right person that you're hiring. It's 100% about the culture of the organization that you work at. What kind of platform do you have to be able to take care of your clients and service them? You know, in today's world, it's a lot about, you know, diversity and inclusion, and how is your organization, you know, are you a sustainable organization going forward? And then frankly, it's about you, right? Everybody wants a great coach who's going to help them to be, you know, that great player. And I think if you could be that great coach, then you know, people are going to come and follow you and want to work with you, Peter. So, you know, I just add those comments. Peter, you also may want to check the chat box, because I think Tommy Dowd had a question as well.
Okay. Well, Tim, we're going to turn it back to you. Thank you, John. We're going to turn it back to you, Tim. And you've got some slides, and we'll do that. We'll do Tom's question.
Yeah, I think let's let Tom go ahead and get his question in first, if that's cool.
Well, thank you, Tim. Peter, congratulations on your work anniversary, my friend. It's wonderful to see you over the past decade add massive value across the nation. So just want to say congratulations.
Thanks, Tom. You must be an avid LinkedIn user, I guess.
Quite frankly, I lead our remote advisor efforts for Q Mutual Group, which is a wonderful organization. And I'm not going to make any money until year 3. And I'm okay with that, which I just encourage other folks to be okay with that. But I do have a question to John Gagliardi, as John and I used to work together and just a wonderful people leader. When it comes to recruiting, John's strategy was so thoughtful that he surrounded himself with, like-minded individuals, head of retail, head of marketing, an advisor. So it wasn't just John, it was John plus 4. And I'm wondering, as you went across the street, John, did you still carry that message forward? And what was the difference in culture? And do you still have that thoughtful approach to the team when it comes to finding the right person? Because I'm a visual learner, John, and I still remember those interview processes. And I thought you'd just comment on it for a moment. That'd be great.
Yeah, I guess 2 philosophies. So the first philosophy, since we're going down memory lane, that I instilled right off the bat, or I learned right off the bat from Mario Conti, who hired me to be to be a bank broker first. And then as I was successful as a manager, he hired me to be a manager. But, he always would quote Teddy Roosevelt and say, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so I've tried to live that philosophy, and I've probably said that quote 1,000 times in my career to every banker, every management development kid right out of school, in tons of meetings. And I think you got to live that philosophy. And there's a great book that I make every new advisor read. It's been out there a while, and of course now I'm drawing a blank on the author, but it's called The Go-Giver. And it's a quick read. I used to actually read it on the plane from DC to Atlanta, and I'd be able to read the whole book. And it's really about, if you want to get a lot of referrals in your career, you have to give more than you can ever ask to receive. And so I've tried to kind of incorporate that into my practice with business partners. And, always, I always felt like if I can go to the business banking head, and if I can go with retail and Wilmington Trust, who's our wealth side, and at my current bank, M&T, and, mortgage. And, if I can be the guy who can always kind of come through for them, then they're going to come through for me, and they're going to help me be successful, whether it's recruiting or frankly, just being able to go to them and say, hey, we're in a pandemic and my folks are stuck at home and they're not making any money. I need some help. So Tommy, yeah, I mean, I believe that, you want to be successful and get referrals, you got to give more than you can ever receive. And there's a great book out there called The Go-Giver, if anybody wants a good quick read.
That's great.
All right, nice.
All right, great, and that's thank you for that, for joining us, Tom, and that was a great answer, John. As Peter mentioned, we have a few more slides that we're going to share with you now. Let me jump back here. Ken, do you want to walk us through these?
We can do this quickly. Some of you may have noticed that we're doing a lot more research using data on individual advisors rather than the kind of research you've gotten accustomed to, where you're comparing different banks and credit unions with each other. And this allows us to get some interesting new insights. We'll share a couple of them with you this afternoon. Right now, we've accumulated a database of over 2,600 advisors. We know lots of things about these advisors, their age, their tenure, their production and assets, the quantity and quality of their planning, their deposit territory, their client books, are they branch-based or second story, are they part of a team, about everything you'd like to know to be able to predict their behavior. And because of that, we're able to do a lot of that kind of prediction. But there's a couple of other insights that are more pertinent to today. The average age of those 2,600 advisors is 46. That's about the same as the estimates we've seen of the industry, which would tend to come in around 47. Now, to me, that doesn't sound like aging, but I guess I have a different perspective on age than some of you do. More pertinent to today's discussion is that the average tenure of these advisors is 5.8 years, but the median tenure is 4.5 years. That means that half of advisors working in banks and credit unions have no more than 4.5 years of tenure with the firm. And of course, most of them have much less than that. So banks and credit unions have a very short tenured sales force. Why is this important? It's important because year after year, as advisors are on the job in their branch, they add to assets. And you can see that in the bottom line there, as their assets go up incrementally every single year. But more importantly, their production increases more rapidly than their assets do. And again, if you look at this span of a 20-year span, it looks like that's pretty much a straight line too. But if you focus on lower tenured advisors in the next slide, you see, in fact, there's a tremendous ramp up over the early months of their career. But it takes a long time. The average advisor in these 2,600 advisors produces about $380,000 a year. An advisor on average doesn't get to that level until the 52nd month. That means that about half of your advisors are pulling down your average production of your firm. And it's only after that 4.5, 5-year period that they become the productive, at least $400,000 advisor you tried to hire. Peter?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Ken. All right, Tim, if you would advance that. Okay, so here we're going to talk about advisor retention. And as we said, it's the net number that really matters. So the retention part is such a big extent. So maybe Denise, very familiar with, and just giving an advisor really regardless of how long they're with a particular firm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a great segue, right? Ken presented some data around that ramp up period, and Tom, the question that we got from Tom a second ago, part of what he shared, right, is that as he's growing his remote center, the expectation is that it's not going to become profitable for a period of time, and that's a result, right, of that ramp up period. Now, there's another way to use the same data that Ken just presented, taking a longer term view of the advisor's career with your firm. In this case, we're sort of setting a 20-year period, and we can use it to calculate the true cost of losing an advisor. It's easy, I think, on the day that you get the bad news that you're losing the advisor, it's easy, I think, in your head to think in terms of the monthly production or the annual production that you've lost, right, when they walk out the door. A $350,000 advisor leaves the firm, you think you have a $350,000 hole to fill in your revenue. We know that misses the bigger picture, because the shortfall that starts the day that you lose the advisor never really goes away. And I'm going to present some data now quickly that demonstrates that. So the dark blue bar in this, or the dark blue line, I should say, in this chart, that's average annual production of the advisor over the course of his or her 20-year tenure with the firm. You can see, as Ken just talked about, right, production increases with tenure. It's not always linear. Now the question is, what happens if you lose that advisor after they've been with your firm for 5 years? So sort of just beyond that break-even point that Ken was just talking about. You can see here, you can kind of look at that dark blue bar. You see that in this data, that advisor in their 6th year, it would have produced close to $600,000. Let's call it $550,000. The replacement advisor that you bring in, assuming that you can replace that, that you can bring in a new advisor to fill that seat on the day that the departing advisor leaves, right? You bring in that new advisor, and in their 1st year, they're going to produce less than $200,000, $180,000. So in year 1, that's the shortfall, right? 550 minus 280. But that's just year 1. You can see that in year 2, your new advisor, who's now in their 2nd year, is producing more, close to $400,000. But that's still less than the departing advisor would have produced if he or she had stayed with your firm. And that's true again in year 3 and year 4 and so forth. The lines never meet, right? So the production, the replacement production of the newly hired advisor never catches up to the production that the existing advisor would have had if they had stayed with your firm.
So Tim, in this graph here, this chart here, it's basically saying that it takes 5 years for the replacing advisor to get close to what a departing advisor would be at. Is that a accurate conclusion from this?
So no. So sorry, I must have been moving a little too quickly. So if you think about January, let's say this is an advisor that you hired in 2000, right? Just to keep the math simple. So December 31, 2005, you learn that you're losing that advisor. January 1, you have a new advisor sitting in that seat. The production of the new advisor will never catch up. Not in the 1st year, 2nd year, 3rd, 4th, 5th. You can run this out through the full 20-year time horizon.
Yeah.
Right? And the replacement advisor will never catch up to where that departing advisor would have been.
Yeah.
And so you're losing money every year.
Yeah.
And you have to add up that money over the 15 future years to figure out how much you've really lost on December 31st, 2001.
Ken, is that because of the assets that the department advisor took?
This assumes that you don't lose any assets.
Okay.
All you're looking at is the fact that a new producer, on average, will never produce as much as the producer who left because of the ramp up on tenure things we've talked about.
Wow.
And so this
margin is going to be even bigger.
And then the gap
in assets that are lost.
Yes, if you lose assets, right, it'll be lost. But Tim, but this is not just the 5-year producer, Tim.
That's right. So let's say you lose an advisor with 8 years of tenure with your firm. It's a very similar picture, right? You can see the production of the replacement advisor never catches up. Fewer years here, fewer years of revenue to replace, but the gap is bigger, right? The gap between the lines is bigger. You can see that same trend, that same phenomenon play out if you're looking at the loss of an advisor with 12 years of tenure with your firm. This looks maybe more like some of the scenarios that we were talking about earlier, right? The advisor that departs is highly productive, close to 800,000. The replacement advisor produces a lot less, again, over fewer years, but the gap is very big. 15, that the loss of a highly tenured advisor, an advisor that's been with you for nearly their entire career at this point. Again, the gap in production is very large, but over fewer years. The real trick, I think, to understanding these findings, as Ken alluded to, right, is to add up the space, add up the shortfall year to year, and that's what we've done here. So on the first line of this table, right, we're going back to that first example. You lose an advisor that has 5 years of tenure with your firm. You can see the cumulative production that the advisor who departed would have had over the remaining 15 years of their tenure. That's the 10.8 million. The cumulative revenue of the replacement advisor over that same 15-year period, 8.1 million. The shortfall is 2.7. We can calculate the present value of that to the firm. It comes in at 1.9 million. We can do the same exercise with the 8-year advisor, the 12-year, and the 15. You can see that in all of these cases, the firm loses at least $2 million in future production every time it loses an advisor, no matter at what stage of the advisor's tenure they leave. So it can be a relatively young advisor, relatively new advisor to your firm, or it can be a highly tenured advisor. The hit to the firm is actually about the same.
Hey, Tim, for the replacement advisor, I guess in each of these scenarios, are we assuming the replacement advisor is a new advisor? I mean, what if those advisors that we're talking about, that people are recruiting are high-level, tenured, high-performing advisors? What if we were able to, woo one of them away from, a broker-dealer? Does that change these numbers? I guess I'm just thinking of the quality of advisor that you hire should be able to stem some of that number. I get that there's going to be a loss, but to say that it never catches up, that's a lot.
So these are average advisors, right? So kind of within the 2,000 or so advisors that are in this data, you're losing an average advisor and you're replacing them with an average advisor. So you are correct, right? To the extent that you may be able to replace a departing advisor with a higher quality advisor, that in that example, yes, the production of the replacement advisor may catch up. On the other hand, if we're being honest, there are also examples where the replacement advisor isn't an upgrade. And in that case, these numbers would look even worse, right? So, but on thinking about kind of the loss of an average advisor and the hiring of someone who will become an average advisor, and that's true too. You mentioned age, or not age, but are they new advisors? That's part of the reason why we use tenure rather than age of the advisor when we're doing this kind of analysis. We find that tenure with a firm is a stronger predictor of performance than age, and it helps to sort of avoid the gray area that I think you started to get into, right? That you're right. Who is the new advisor? Are they really fresh, right? Are they fresh out of college, or right?
Yeah, I didn't mean age at all. I meant tenure. When I say new advisor, I mean new to the job, not new to the tenure of the job. But I think that this all still, speaks right to exactly your point of 50% of the point of just the importance of always being recruiting. Always looking for that high level talent. Making sure that it's the right person that you put into the seat. It hurts from a sales manager perspective to have an empty seat. It hurts a lot more to have the wrong person in the empty seat. And this chart just really hits it home as to how that long-term effect, you think you're filling a spot and okay, well, I've got it, but this just shows why you have to have that right person in the seat, because long-term it cost you a lot of money.
No,
Yeah.
I disagree with Denise. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Lisa, that's a good point, but I think just as important is the retention factor versus the recruiting factor here. I think this tells us more than ever that it's very, very important to be paying attention to our top producers and making sure that there's a compelling future painted for them. I think, Michael, you mentioned that earlier, right? They have a compelling picture of what their future looks like at the firm. You've done everything you can to keep them. We hear from a lot of sales managers and program leaders who talk about, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't really mess with my top advisors. They're doing great. Those are the advisors you want to pay the most attention to because the cost of replacing them is too high, right? And so I think, John, you mentioned the value of coaching. Here we see that more than ever. If you're coaching and you've got a coaching relationship with those top advisors, these costs won't come into play as much as, you know, those top advisors that are being shopped by your competitors because they don't see a compelling future. They don't have a relationship with their sales manager or their program leader. I think you've got to be recruiting within your own existing team of advisors just as much as you're recruiting outside.
Yep, totally agree.
And Lisa, I think it's important to recognize that this is real data. These are of the, let's say, couple hundred who've just been recruited. This is what they produced this first year. And so that means that for every one who produces a little more, there's another one who produces a little less. And maybe you're better at recruiting than someone else and you always come out ahead. It's not a card I would bet on, right?
Right. So, I agree.
So, but the key, I think my key takeaway is if you're about to lose an advisor, you're going to lose $2 million. Can't you use some of that money to keep them?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get overly analytical here. Is there any time built into these gaps as well, right? We're not going to be able to replace these departing advisors straight away.
Right, exactly. So if you don't do that, the gap is larger.
Okay.
And then you add on to that the cost of training and ramp up. I think we're seeing more than ever too that firms are challenged to do the training to ramp up new advisors quickly. If they are bringing in newer, less tenured advisors or advisors who have been in the business a shorter time, you know, someone mentioned bringing in different types of advisors. If you're bringing in juniors or associates and building them up through the ranks, the cost of that training in time and in terms of ramp up also plays into account here, and certainly impacts the numbers that we're seeing here too.
This is Jay. I'll make a comment on what Denise was saying. You know, the stats regarding your net advisor force should be some of the key metrics you're looking at constantly. It's not just my net gain. You know, I have say 100 advisors and I was a 95% retention. Well, one, you want to know who you're hiring, where you're hiring from. If you're losing them, is it retirement? Who you're losing them to and why? Those are things that you should be looking at constantly. And I could tell you, and I was just thinking when you were talking about, you know, reselling your advisor force, Denise, I was thinking about all the $1 million producers that we hired into our programs in 2020 last year. And I would say a majority of them left because of culture where they were. And we happen to have the right program, the right partnerships in the right area to say, we'll listen and we're able to get them to come over, but we would not have had that opportunity if their existing managers and firms were paying more attention to them.
Yeah, someone who I like and respect very much in this industry used to say, culture eats strategy for lunch. And people are looking for that right culture, that right fit.
Okay, Tim.
All right, I think that's that wraps up that section. Peter, do you want to keep?
I want to take this next slide here. If you go on to that next one. Okay, so this is some of the ideas that, you know, firms have utilized successfully to make sure that their handling those existing advisors the right way. And it's everything from outfitting them appropriately and having virtual resources so that they can, interact with their clients in the way that they need. A full technology suite, the right product set that they have, appropriate referrals, timely and accurate commission and administrative services. That is so important, especially the higher producing advisors, that they have the sales support, that they get paid right, that they get paid on time, that their business is handled appropriately by ops, client service and ops. And then we'll go to that next one, Tim. Sales support, the right ratio of sales of advisors to sales assistants, cost sharing that allows advisors to invest in their business with the firm investing in the business. We found that, especially for higher producing advisors, very important to their satisfaction level. Environment, and this is that culture point that Denise mentioned and others mentioned, it's an environment where they're viewed as more than a production number, where they're truly valued, where, where the firm views them as a critical component of what that financial institution does and views them personally as very important. Visibility, positive attitude from everyone within the organization, and specifically confidence in their direct manager. And if there was another one that really comes out when I've interviewed advisors that have moved to other firms, it's that confidence in their direct manager. Is that manager going to go to bat for them? Does that manager understand them and what their needs are, what's important to them? Does that manager invest in what development issues they want to have handled? And it really is, does that manager, really, in essence, work on their behalf? And so those are some of the things that we would just recommend that we've heard, we've seen, that are very important to the retention of those very best advisors. And panelists, any that resonate, or Denise, any that resonate for any of you?
Well, I was just going to hark back to the article about Fidelity, and I think we had a question about this earlier. But one thing I'll point out here is that the ability to provide the right virtual resources today is critical as well. Advisors today, given the way that they need to meet with their clients and engage with their clients, are looking for institutions or programs where they can have the right virtual resources and technology available that gives them the flexibility that they need to engage with their clients in the way that they need to engage with them today in today's environment. I think most of us can agree that the virtual world, or the way that we're virtually interacting with clients, the way that we're virtually interacting here today, isn't going to change in the near future. Even as we get through the last wave of this pandemic, I think we're still looking at virtual engagement as one of the primary ways that we engage with clients, which takes away boundaries and gives us more flexibility. And so advisors really are looking for that. And I think that's one of the reasons that we see firms like Fidelity investing so much into virtual resources or virtual positions. And then also the diversity and inclusion component too, that we saw with the Merrill example. I think a lot of advisors are looking for places to land where there is diversity and inclusion, and that they feel represented, and that there are people that look like them, women and members of different minority groups are looking for that in these institutions. So I think those are important things to recognize as you're building out your teams, and as we think about ways to recruit and retain advisors.
So Peter, something that you and I spoke yesterday about retention, and something that you kind of got me thinking. And the reality of, I think, our businesses, we were all financial advisors at one point, right? And as financial advisors, you got that great client, and what did you do? You have put together, you basically talk to your client about, what is your operating model? What is your marketing plan? You kind of built, you had an operating model that you dealt with your clients with. You have a marketing plan to make sure the clients feel good, right? Because a good client, you want to make sure they're being touched on a regular basis. You're trying to educate those clients. And so I kind of thought about it, and we do the exact same thing. And so I actually wrote down a couple of points when Peter and I were talking yesterday. You know, so I have a couple of non-negotiables when I'm dealing with my advisors. First of all, it's you know, the first thing I always kind of say is it's not a goal, it's their paycheck. You know, you think about you see all these commercials about, you know, are you on path to retirement? Well, not every person retires the same way, right? It looks different. Well, you know, we come up with these chaotic goals that we assign randomly to FAs for the year. And at the end of the day, an FA can hit that goal, but if their kid, you know, if they can't afford to send their kid to University of Virginia or Georgetown, wherever it is, you know, what really good is it? So I always kind of say it's not a goal, it's their paycheck, it's their dreams. You know, I have a couple of non-negotiables. First of all, if somebody calls me, I answer. If I'm stuck in a meeting like this, I'll text them back and say I'm in the meeting. Text me if it's urgent. I always respond. And then they're like Denise, you said they're looking to get something done. So when they have that problem, they need somebody who's going to kind of, you know, basically run through the wall and get it done for them in the organization, who isn't afraid to kind of go up the chain and push. So I try to do that. You know, I always positive. And then, you know, the other thing I'll tell you is, like, I always just tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, which I think is important, which is the same kind of thing you're doing with your client, right? Sometimes you got to say, look, you're not going to retire if you keep spending and be able to have enough money if you keep spending like you are. Well, sometimes you got to say to the advisor, if you continue doing these practices, you're not going to ever be that $1 million producer. I have a marketing plan also with my team. So, you know, I do the birthday cards, recognition, all that kind of stuff, but I do my best to win over the family, right? So when I hire somebody, the first thing I do is I send the wife or husband, or, you know, I send the wife flowers, the husband I'll send something to. I try to figure out, like, you know, what's their thing. And I always say, welcome to the family. And then, you know, I try to incorporate the family in as many things as I can. With COVID, it's been really hard. So we've been doing things like we did a virtual contest. Like we sent everybody a volleyball and said, okay, everybody has to make their own Wilson, you know, things like that. But the bottom line is, if you get the spouse or the, you know, you get the spouse and you get the kids to say, wow, your boss is cool, it's a lot harder for them to leave you. So I really try to do that. And then the other part is the education piece. I really focus on that. And, you know, sometimes you have that big producer who's been there 20 years and they'll say to you, you know what, I don't really want to go to that training because I'm not going to hear anything I haven't heard before. And I always kind of say, you know what, you're not, but you're probably going to hear something that you forgot about. So you should be there and learn. And then I try to do the trainings with them. And so I'm in there and I'm, you know, if we're doing role plays and we've been doing a lot of virtual role plays with our advisors and stuff, I'm doing the role plays too. And I'm screwing up just like they are. And you laugh about it and you make it fun. So, you know, I think if you want to really keep that talent, you got to think of it. You got to think like an advisor. And how do you keep that top client? They want to be touched. They want to learn from you. They want to know that when they have a problem, you're going to fix it. And I think if you do that, those people are going to stay with you over the long haul.
Great comment, Sean.
Thank you.
Panelists, any other thoughts on the retention part?
I think, John, you know, you're very well said. Lots of really good points there. I mean, lots of great ideas. Love the volleyball idea. I think ultimately what it also boils down to is the advisors want to feel as though they have a voice and they're heard. Certainly what was on the last screen, you know, by their direct manager. So it's always important that, you know, my people know that they can come to me. But I would say, you know, one other thing that we do at Huntington is we have what's called a colleague advisory group. And, you know, others probably have this as well. But, you know, this is a place where, you know, each region picks a colleague as their council member. And it's kind of nice that you can go to your peer, you know, share some ideas, talk to that peer who's going through the same thing. And then that colleague advisory group is meeting with senior leadership. And so our president of the investment company attends every single one of our colleague advisory calls. When we have or have had in-person meetings, he's there, and they've been able to see a lot of change from the things that they've been able to bubble up to senior leadership to say, hey, this is really impacting our business. This is making it tough for us to move forward, to get business processed, or quite frankly, this is making it, hard for us to, basically have a living and be able to afford what we need in order to support our families. It's a good place where they feel that they can go to that leadership and share their thoughts, share their concerns, and they've been able to see positive changes from that. So I think that's just another aspect of making sure, it goes back to what John's saying, you want to make sure you're treating your advisors like they are your top clients, because truly they are. That colleague advisory group is another way that I think we do that here at Huntington, and it's gotten really good support from the senior leadership, and I've gotten really good feedback from the advisors on it as well.
Boy, that's excellent. I tell you, more and more firms are starting things like that. And they're realizing, there is multiple benefits. Yes, it gives you an ear to the advisors, and you get, some great ideas that, you probably wouldn't have thought of without their input. You get that, but also it gives them a bigger stake in the organization. And it shows that you are advisor friendly or, employee friendly. And that's got to help on the recruiting front. I mean, if you're out there recruiting an advisor and you say, oh, we have this advisory group that meets with the president of the investment firm, and they serve up ideas, and we've implemented them. And that's the type of organization that, that's appealing, because we're going to need those value propositions, as was said many times on this call. We're going to need that value proposition if we're not out there throwing around a bunch of money. And that's a perfect example. That should be, and it probably is, in your value proposition to as managers out there recruiting advisors, because that's what folks want to hear, especially in today's work environment that's very employee centric and employee focused. Nice. Okay. All right, Tim, we have just a few more minutes. What slides, what info do you think we can still share in 7 minutes?
Well, yeah, it seems to me like this one has come up a few times. I don't know if you and Denise want to highlight a few of the slides in this section. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and let's do that. Let's just jump over this one, because in the essence of time. So what we're going to cover here for just a couple minutes here is advisors that are retiring, and the 3 ways that we've seen firms implement some type of transition plan. And, we have a white paper on our website about this, and there's some information, more information than we'll cover that's in the deck today than we'll be able to cover. But we do see more and more firms put into place some type of retirement package where it can be a retiring and acquiring advisor, where the retiring advisor shares in commission over a 3 or 5 year period. The acquiring advisor, gets a lower commission over that 3 or 5 year period for being able to take over that book. That's probably the most popular in the financial institution environment as far as having something like that in place. The next one, Tim, is where the financial institution is in the middle with a loan payment. This is typically how wirehouses have done these deals over time, where the retiring advisor receives a payment. The acquiring advisor receives a loan from the financial institution. So the retiring advisor leaves getting paid out day one. The book goes to the acquiring advisor with a loan to pay back the financial institution. As I said, this is the typical wirehouse model, where the financial institutions, got a financial stake in the game. And then the third method that we see is where the retiring advisor gets a payment for their book of business from the financial institution.
this is many times for smaller books or like a smaller book might come into case here. And then the financial institution divides up that book and they use it to help recruit in multiple advisors instead of just having it all go to one acquiring advisor, if you will. It's used as collateral to help bring in multiple advisors. So, they chalk it up as a recruiting cost. So, another way to handle the financial transactions of books. So the important thing is, though, in all these, the retiring advisor has some type of package so that they don't depart your financial institution just before retirement and take a deal somewhere else. And then you lose those relationships, you lose those assets, you lose that revenue. Where instead, if you can put one of these in place, you have an orderly transition. And in most cases, and as the data shows, as we've done this in the white paper, the true financial cost of the financial institution is minimal, if at all. It's much more administrative and there's some work involved, but the financial cost to save client assets and clients is pretty small. So we really suggest you have this in place in your plan before you need it so that advisors know it's out there and they don't have to find out after it's too late.
Yeah, I would say where we see the greatest success is with institutions who not only have this in place early with particular advisors, but have it in place just as part of their overall retention and development plan. So this is something that's talked about when an advisor is hired. An advisor knows what that compelling future looks like, right? They know what their whole career path looks like, including the end zone and how they'll transition away from the institution. And there's no question or uncertainty in their mind. That becomes a retention mechanism, right? When that certainty exists within the institution, they're not going to be recruited away. So this is something you develop and then communicate often.
Okay. The panelists, how many of you all have something like this in place?
Well, we're developing one right now, a succession plan that would look like number one.
Was there a particular event, if you don't mind me asking, that prompted you to do that?
No, Peter, there was a growing awareness and understanding that we had senior advisors, mature advisors, big book advisors that we frankly had no plan for. And we did not want to be caught with our pants down. And so the timing is working out that we're putting this together, documenting it, modeling it, rolling out. And then one of those advisors has said, hey, listen, I'd like to retire in 3 or 5 years. And we were like, oh, great. Guess what? So I don't know if there was anything specific. It might've predated me. I do know that we've got an apparatus in place now that can handle some of the 5, 7, 8, 9 advisors that are probably in that place of thinking about this issue. So
yeah, okay. I think I saw Jay, Lisa, and John's hands go up. You all have them in place?
We're in the first stages of it. So ours is just really developing. It would look probably more like Model 3.
Model 3, okay. John?
And Peter, we haven't, we really haven't, we're in very, very early stages. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like, to be honest.
Okay.
Peter, in our managed programs, we're more like option number 2. In our dual programs, we help them with all 3 different options.
Yeah, good for you. Okay, well, it's good you're thinking about it. Usually, as we've said before on this, there's 2 types of camps you can fall in. Either you have this in place, or you will have it in place once you lose a high-producing advisor to a competitor. So we really suggest you get it in place before that happens. So it looks like you're moving that direction. All of you are good. Okay, Tim, we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah. So
yeah.
As I scroll forward here, we'll just wrap up. Normally, we're going to skip over a few slides here. Normally, I'd say you could join me at the bar, and I'll be happy to go over these for you. But our virtual environment makes that hard. So instead, I'm going to take one last opportunity to thank our sponsors for today. And all of the content I just skipped over will be in the deck that will get emailed around. So please look at it. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. But for now, thanks to our sponsors for today, Ameriprise Financial Institutions Group and InSource. Thanks to all of you on the panel for joining today. Thanks to all of you in the audience for joining. Our next virtual dialogue is going to be on May 13th. That's on developing holistic advisors that embrace financial planning. A little later over the summer, looking into June and July and August, we're looking at doing a virtual event on insurance and technology, and potentially a virtual event around our biannual survey of advisor compensation. And in the fall, we're all looking forward to a potential return to doing these events in person, where gathering at the bar after the conclusion is actually an option. We've got dates for these on our website. Please visit the website and reach out if you'd like to be a part of them. I think that's all that we've got for today. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.